You are listening to Balloon Killers. I'm your host, Chrissy Riley, and each episode I'll be talking to someone from the world of cowboy mounted shooting, which is one of the most exciting and fastest growing equestrian sports. Hold on to your hats because it's going to get western. Hello everybody, I hope everyone's doing well. I'm feeling a little bit like Dorothy, sitting here in some high winds in the foothills of the Rockies in northern Colorado, and I'm waiting for the house to pick up and spin away to Oz, just like Dorothy, which is quite the contrast to the glorious winter sun that I experienced in Queen Creek, Arizona for the Winter Championships. And I'm still riding that high, to be honest. I was left so inspired by the amazing riding, the amazing shooting, the beautiful horses. And while it was really hard to not be riding, because of course, when you go to an event that you compete at, and you only get to watch, it makes you really want to be riding. But I do think I learned a lot about what it's like at a major. I've never been to a major before, so it was my first time. And I'm feeling a lot more prepared for when I actually take a horse myself next time. I was really energized by the conversations that I had, both with the guests that I interviewed, but also with the people that came up to me to tell me how much they're enjoying Balloon Killers, and the conversations that I had with people about their mounted shooting experiences. So thank you to everyone who came up and gave me such kind words that really fueled me and gave me lots of energy for continuing this work. The Winter Championships was my first attempt at live podcasting, which was quite the learning experience, let me tell you. I had to figure out new technology, very different to the technology that I normally use, and then also live presenting skills. And this is a little known fact about me. That's a question that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast. What's a little known fact about you? Well, a little known fact about me is that my bachelor's degree is in music. And I used to be in a punk rock band called Four in a Bed back in the day. So I'm not a complete stranger to the technology, the recording technology, or to live performing either. But I haven't done anything like that for a really long time. So it was definitely on the edge of my comfort zone, which is a really good thing. I like to push myself. I like to test the boundaries and push my limits. But I also have a lot of learning to do and practice to do to get better, which is something I'm actually really excited about. The videos that I recorded live at Queen Creek are now mostly available as video podcasts on both Spotify and YouTube. I think they are still just audio in other places like iTunes, Amazon, and iHeart. I've already interviewed the wife of my guest on this episode, and I always make a point of trying to interview people who have different perspectives on the sport and can bring some learning to the podcast. I met Trevor Hirshberg at the Tombstone shoot, and we talked about our shared experiences in English riding. His, of course, is as a farrier though, which is really interesting. In the horse world that I grew up in and that I come from, we learn really early on about how critical taking care of horses' feet is to their health. And when you think about how painful or sensitive it is when our nails are too long or too short, in fact, side note here, but I dropped the tailgate of my truck on my thumb and I lost my thumbnail. It looks really gross. And it's really sensitive, so I can only imagine what it's like for horses standing on their feet when their feet are too short or too long, and the impact that it has on the development of their bones when they're still growing, and the compensation issues that it can cause. It really does make sense that horse health is critical to their performance. So when I got talking to Trevor in Tombstone, I got really interested in what he does. He's a critically acclaimed farrier in the industry, and you'll hear more about that in our interview. I learn so much from the posts that Trevor makes about the issues that he's fixing in his daily work and the case studies that he's presenting. So I thought that he might have some really useful knowledge for mounted shooters who listen to this podcast. Now, besides being a farrier and a farrier of mounted shooting horses and also horses from other disciplines, Trevor is also a very successful mounted shooting competitor, as well as the husband and father of successful shooters. So we're going to hear all about that as well. So Trevor, we just started a new year. How was the last shooting year for you? What were some of your successes and challenges? And you can take this in any direction you like, because I know that you play multiple roles in mounted shooting as a farrier, as a father, as a husband. So go wherever you want to go with this.
First to say thank you, Christy, for having me on your podcast.
Pleasure.
Last year I was injured. I thought it'd be a good idea to ride a training horse, and like any other guy, I wanted to see how fast he would go, and ended up pulling my groin. And afterwards, I was leaning over the horse, and I said, "Honey, come over here." She came over, and I said, "I'm gonna stick to the shoeing. You stick to the training, because I freaking can't move." So last year was a mending year for me. But to be honest with you, Christy, I actually feel more success from my wife doing well, my son doing well. So I kind of took the role as the cheerleader, the photographer, the water boy, the groom. So this was a mending year for me last year from being injured. And my son did well. He won a showcase at the World Finals, and
Nice.
the horses were healthy, and I was still able to shoe horses, so I could take some credit for having good hooves and the clients having good hooves. So I actually find success in other people's success. It makes me happy. I'm riding now. The problem is my wife tuned my horse for me, and it's running like really fast, and the balloons are just flying past me. So I'm like, thanks for tuning my horse, but I need to slow her down a little bit.
That sounds like a good problem to have. Tell us how you got into mounted shooting.
I've been a farrier for a long time, and I've never heard of mounted shooting. I had, a lot of the disciplines I shoot for and the barns I shoot for, but I never even heard of mounted shooting. And until I met Carrie, and she was telling me about mounted shooting. So we started dating, and we went, I remember, I never forget this, we went to a major in Queen Creek, and I saw the check that she wrote for the major, and I was like, holy cow, how often do you do this? And she's like, oh, 4 or 5 times a year. And I was thinking, wow, that's like a used car to get in this thing. Fortunately, she won a lot and got a lot of money back. So I had to make a decision. Do I just go and be a spectator, or do I join? And, I've been through some sports. I used to race motorcycles and play racquetball and whatnot. So I decided it'd be more fun for me to join Carrie when we go to the shoots. So I got into it because I married a mounted shooter.
Besides Carrie, what do you love about the sport?
I tell people this all the time when I'm shooting horses, and they kind of spark my, interest in mounted shooting. For some reason, in mounted shooting, if you start getting good at mounted shooting, or you start enjoying it, and I don't know if it's like this in roping or barrel racing, but you become a mounted shooter. It's almost, I guess it's addictive. And you start hanging out with only mounted shooters. You start only talking about mounted shooting. You only watch mounted shooting. You read the magazines from mounted shooting. It's a crazy sport where I guess everything else just seems kind of boring compared to mounted shooting. And, I'll ask people when I shoot for them, what do you do? Oh, Western pleasure. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Hey, you should try mounted shooting. And they're like, well, it sounds difficult. Well, my wife can show you how to do it. So I think it just has a real draw to it, the excitement. And I also, I shoot for people that compete for ribbons. And I'm like, listen, in mounted shooting, even the smallest little shoot, you have your chance to get all your money back. So that's one thing I like about it. No matter how small the shoot is, if you do well, you can cover some of your costs. We're not going to get rich. We're not going to be on the cover of a magazine, but you might be able to have a free weekend once in a while. And And so I like that part of it.
I definitely identify with the fact that I am a mounted shooter now. I sort of see myself almost as a mounted shooter first and a doctor of education second these days.
That's funny. That's what I was telling people for a while. I was like, I came into this. I was a farrier that tried mounted shooting. Now I'm a mounted shooter that shoots horses.
So, on that note of shoeing horses, I know that you've been a farrier for a really long time and you've worked with horses competing in lots of different disciplines. So, tell us about that.
Yeah, we as a farrier, we go through a roller coaster of what you want, what you think you want, and when you first start shoeing horses, you have ideas of what who you want to shoot for, and as you get better, then your goals change. So I've done like the horses that run for the million. I've recently went over to Europe and did some Olympic horses. But in the end, you find a happy place to where you're comfortable, and the people that you like to shoot for, the horses that are well behaved, or maybe they're a little flexible. You think, well, I want to shoot the most expensive horses in the world. I mean, for me, I had like an eye opening. I went over to Europe to shoot horses, and I was by myself in cross ties in Germany, and I said to myself, you know what? It's just a horse. After all this traveling, it's a horse. So I get the same joy in my shop at my house as I do shoeing an expensive horse. So for me, I've done almost all the disciplines. I still shoe some police horses and dressage, and I shoot jumping horses and some Western horses. So I've pretty much done a lot of it, and I've kind of settled into a happy place where I have positive days.
And you certainly have a nice shop as well. I've seen your shop on Facebook, and that's a pretty impressive little blacksmith's workshop that you've got going on there.
Yeah, it gets to be like 115, 120 in Phoenix. So I was gonna buy myself like a hot rod, a motorcycle, I don't know, something. And I was trying to think of what would make my life better. And I came up with the idea of an air conditioned shop in Phoenix in the summer. So I could get it down to a reasonable temperature in the summer and enjoy myself.
Nice. So, how is working on mounted shooting horses compared to other disciplines? What's unique from a farrier's perspective about mounted shooting horses?
There's a few things. I when I go to the big events, people come from mounted shooting across the country, and sometimes they live in rural areas, and they get the shooting that they could find. So sometimes the feet need a bit of a makeover. So in some other disciplines where it's really evolved, like especially in the Olympic level, you're going to see horses' hooves on a better maintenance program sometimes. But the actual shoeing of and I tell this people all the time, they come to my shop, or even when I flew over to Europe, what trick do we have for reining, or what trick do we have for show jumping?
Hmm.
And having a wife that's a trainer, I can tell you there's only one thing that matters, and that's to keep the horse sound. So I know some tricks, I never use them. My main goal on any shoeing is to save you a vet bill and to keep your horse going down the road. So there are tricks to make the shoe stay on better. There might be a trick to make it run faster. But in the end, you just don't want to miss a competition, or you don't want a huge vet bill. So
This is a question that's always up on Mounted Shooter Soapbox, and I'm sure that you've got an opinion here. Barefoot or shoes?
yeah, barefoot shoes. I've gone around this a million times. I'm just going to give you an analogy that helps explain barefoot and shoes. So if we're going to watch TV as a human, we don't need shoes on. But if we're going to go play basketball, we wear high tops, right? Why is the reason why we wear high tops? Is so we don't sprain our ankle. So I weigh 200 pounds, and I get on a horse, and we're going to run as fast as we can around corners. So the horseshoe does two things. It protects their foot, what most people think is the only thing. It protects their feet from chipping. That's the small part of it. But the horseshoe actually supports their leg. That's why when a horse has an injury, like a suspensory injury or something, there's a different shoe for that. So the main reason why we shoe horses is to prevent injuries. And if someone says, well, they weren't born with shoes on, well, neither are we, but we wear shoes for hiking. We wear shoes for basketball. We put wraps on their legs so they don't blow a tendon, right? We warm them up so they don't blow a tendon. So it's really a preventative thing. And it also, like, I lost my good horse from blowing a meniscus. What happened? She slipped, and the footing was bad, and she slipped. So we also don't want horses slipping, because that's when, just like we would blow a tendon in their knee, the horses can blow tendons also. So it's actually to support the leg. That's their biggest reason why. It's preventative maintenance.
That's a really helpful answer, and I'm sure that some people are going to be paying attention to that. Now, you play a lot of different roles in mounted shooting. As I've mentioned already, you're the farrier, you're a father of a mounted shooter, and also your husband to Carrie. What's it like to support such a successful woman in the sport?
People ask me sometimes, like, do I bet Carrie on a run, because we're close to the same division. She's a 6 and I'm a 5. And I have to tell you, that never happens. I never razz my wife, say, I could beat you on this run, because it never does really happen. So I get joy in her winning. She's the horse trainer, I'm the farrier. So for the most part, I ask her for advice instead of trying to brag if I'm going to beat her or not. And Carrie's really dynamic. There's so many different roles that she does for our ranch, between sponsors and training, and she's a great ambassador in our industry. So I always say beauty and the beast. I help out, but she's the brains. She has a master's degree in business, and she's just an awesome coach, awesome trainer. So she asked me about horseshoeing, and I asked her about mounted shooting. So I know my role, and she knows hers, and we make a great team together.
That's great. And she's such a lovely human. What are some of the challenges of being a husband to a mounted shooter, a successful mounted shooter, and what have you learned along the way?
Well, through all the roles, that we assume now that we run clubs and we do clinics and stuff, there's going to be some natural challenges along the way. And I was talking to an Olympic rider just this summer, and she had been through some challenges that you wouldn't even think of, but it just comes with the territory. So we've had some challenges and some challenging people. When we first got into mounted shooting, you got to remember, Carrie and I are both problem solvers. She wants to fix horses, and I want to fix their hooves. So, in the parking lots, we would listen to people talk about, wish we had more added money, or wish we had bigger prizes, or maybe wish we could be in the NFR someday, something like that. So we kind of listened, and we tried to help, and we started a club. And Carrie brought her personal sponsors into mounted shooting, and we have a great relationship with them. And anything that Carrie and I do for the sponsors, we try to give back twofold. So sometimes, the challenges naturally come along, but we're dealing with it, and we've learned from it, and we're growing from it, and we look forward. We love the mounted shooting sport itself, and we look forward to making it better and better every year.
And I appreciate so much the amount of support that Carrie provides to people. And I saw you also when I was in Tombstone, buzzing around, helping people with shoe questions, feet questions. So I know that you both give so much to the sport, and I really respect and appreciate that.
It's our passion. It's who we are. And, like, if somebody comes into our life and wants to be a mounted shooter, they got to kind of strap up, because this weekend we're going to mounted shooting. Next weekend we're having a clinic. The weekend after that we're going to mounted shooting. So
Yeah.
it's a big part of our life, and we're thankful for mounted shooting. And Carrie makes a living in mounted shooting. And when I was in Europe, Carrie rode one of the Olympic horses, and the trainer there was like, "Why is she in mounted shooting? Like, she could be an Olympic dressage rider." Carrie's like, boring. I like mounted shooting." So she really loves the sport.
I can see that. I can see that passion. Now, these questions are the ones that I often ask people who come on the podcast. So they're pretty standard questions. What
So,
is your favorite pattern and why? And what tips do you have for running it?
well, I don't know. I feel like some of the 6s and the 5-6 they have such fast hands, like machine guns. So I actually like the patterns that I could just run my horse and shoot, and run my horse and shoot. So there's a pattern called the snake, and everybody knows the snake. You kind of go up the left side, and you go through round barrels twice and come back around. And I feel like on that pattern, I can really just let loose and shoot, and not stressed out about shooting through a gate or whatnot. So it's called the snake. And my only recommendation, like if you watch Zane or somebody run it, is the more you can have a clean line, straight line up to the top, the faster you are, instead of swerving in and swerving out. I'd have to say that's my favorite one.
I ran that one in the summer, and it helped me to actually win my class for that shoot.
Oh,
When you look at that pattern in the book, it looks really intimidating, but you're absolutely right. If you can get as straight a line as possible, it really does go fast and smooth. What's the win that you're most proud of and why?
I don't have a certain win that really stands out for me. It was when my wife won Westerns, and I met her in the stalls afterwards, and she was crying, and I told her, so let's remember today that we're happy. We have this great memory together in the stall, hugging and crying about the win. So that's the one win I remember the most.
Oh, I love that. I love that you picked one of her wins. That's so special.
Well, she's the trainer, right? So she's the ones that teach. She's our coach. She's the trainer. So if I win, people are like, "Oh, good job." If she wins, they all come running to the stall and hugging her, kissing her, and stuff.
Now, you've got a lot of experience with preparing the feet of horses for mounted shooting, and you see Carrie preparing a lot of horses for mounted shooting and training horses for mounted shooting. What advice would you give to a newer shooter?
That's a good question because you could go down a rabbit hole and be frustrated with mounted shooting and leave mounted shooting. So I really suggest that you get a referral to somebody that somebody else trusts and that you could trust. And so if you are not a mounted shooter right now, get a referral to somebody like a trainer that's been in the business for a while, that somebody else referred to you to give you advice about the horse, about the guns, and about what shoots to go to. Because, especially men, right? When they first get into something, they want to rock it. Well, when you first start shooting, you can't shoot on a horse that runs like a rocket because you're going to miss balloons and you get frustrated and you end up ruining the horse. So my suggestion is to get with somebody that's a good coach that could kind of guide you through the beginning part of it. And then also, I did this in racquetball and I did this in other sports. Pay for some lessons because people that take lessons learn the right muscle memory, but it really helps keep you focused. It helps you have the right form. And you almost need two horses. You almost need a horse that you start out with that you can learn how to shoot. And then once you get pretty good about shooting, then you buy another horse that can run fast. So sometimes you could have both, but be patient with the speed. Just like when Carrie trains a horse, she's really patient with the speed. So cut yourself some slack. You're not going to be great at mounted shooting no matter who you are when you first start. Cut yourself a little slack and have fun. And it takes time. Like nobody's looking at you saying, well, you suck because you're new. Well, we all sucked when we were new. So it's okay. Like we're glad to have you in our sport. We're glad that you're competing with us, and your improvement will be your happiness. Like enjoy the process.
I love that advice about getting lessons because it's really interesting when you look at other disciplines. And I know you've worked with horses in a lot of other disciplines, but in other horse disciplines, everyone's taking lessons. Even the people at the top are still taking lessons and still have a trainer. So I think it's really important to keep learning, to have someone who is watching you run, to have someone who can identify what your shortcomings are and provide you with guidance and advice. And I know that that's helped me so much with the people that I have around here that I spend time working with.
Well, I mean, even the top level riders in the world, they don't call it trainers. No matter how good they are, they call it coaching. So
Right.
let's say like Carrie would to take lessons from somebody, she would call it coaching. So yeah, some people never stop with the learning process. So
Exactly that. Everyone who's listening to this is going to know you as a mounted shooter, but what's a little known fact about you?
well, one thing that people probably don't know, they see me and Carrie and then my son Lucas walking around. I actually have two other children, and I'm very proud of them. Case in Berkeley. Case is around 30, and so is Berkeley. And they're both successful humans in this world, and I love them. And Berkeley's been to a couple shoots, but my son's never been to one, so most people wouldn't know that I have two older children also.
Oh, I love that you mentioned that so that people would know that about you. What are you looking forward to this year? We've just turned the corner into a new year. What plans do you have and what are you looking forward to?
I always said, like Terry does clinics on Saturdays, and when we bought this place, we got a really fought hard to get a permit to shoot. So we have a property that we could do mounted shooting on, and I always said to myself, I'm gonna practice someday, and I'm gonna get really good. Well, every Saturday, people haul into my place for horses to get shot, and so they're doing the clinic. I end up working, so I keep telling myself, one of these days, I'm gonna practice. So my goal someday is to practice because I don't think I've ever practiced one day before a shoot, which it probably shows. But someday I'm going to practice because I actually own a mounted shooting facility.
Isn't that the way it always works? So you get so busy doing the work to support the facility that you don't have time to use it yourself.
And it's hard to say no to people. Like sometimes I drive 200-300 miles in a day to go shoot horses. So if somebody says I'll haul my horse to your house, how do I say no to that? It's like, of course you can.
Well, you're a very busy man, so I really do appreciate the time that you have spent talking with me today. So much valuable information that I know a lot of people are going to benefit from. Thanks so much, Trevor, for taking the time to chat with me, and thanks for all that you do for our sport. It's very much appreciated. And as always, if there are balloon killers you would like to hear interviewed, please email me on balloonkillers@gmail.com. That's balloonkillers, all one word, @gmail.com.